Well, again, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about some of the work of the office, and also just to talk about this budget season, which is underway, or this budget submittal process, which is underway. The first thing that I want to talk about is just some work that our office is doing to create a safer school environment, and is my hope to grow this strategy to all schools in King County. So in January of 2024, one of my senior deputy prosecuting attorneys, who is a former public defense attorney and also a leader in the national drug court movement and expert, a nationally recognized expert in that field, came to me with an idea she had about how do we ensure that young people are returning to school in a safe manner. So in our state and in our community, every single young person has the right to go to school. And that includes young people who may have been charged with a crime, may have been held in detention or released from detention. It includes young people who were sent to our state juvenile rehabilitation facility and have been released. And the reason that matters is because, one, they have a right to go to school, but also school is such an important protective factor. But we also wanted to ensure that these were students that did not slip through the cracks simply because they were high needs and often deemed high risk. And so, what our Safer School strategy does is we really improve the linkage and the communication between prosecuting attorneys, juvenile probation counselors, court, and school officials, and sometimes law enforcement to talk to schools and school officials about what a safe return to school looks like. Um, you know, we work with the court to share the information that we're allowed to share. Some juvenile information, particularly as it relates to criminal case involvement, is protected, but we share what we can, and we also help the school communicate out to the broader school community, and we ensure that there are certain measures and interventions set up at the school level so that young people can engage in education and succeed. And that sounds like a very simple thing to get all of the adults who have information to talk to one another. But until we launched Safer Schools, there wasn't really any kind of formal structure in play. The other thing that we do, and this also kind of relates to safer schools, is that there is a model threats assessment protocol and policy for schools that receive either complaints or concerns that there may be firearms in school, or if there are young people who have been accused of or convicted of carrying firearms and they are returning to school. And sometimes those linkages weren't made. So my deputy prosecuting attorney who leads this work also makes sure that law enforcement is involved. And we're really working hard to ensure that that protocol is followed in all of our schools in King County. Now, the deputy prosecuting attorney that leads this work also carries a criminal caseload of 55 cases. And these are cases that involve serious felony charges against juveniles. And I say that because this type of effort is really resource driven. We really need to have the capacity to have a dedicated person to do this important work with schools in all parts of King County. Another thing that I want to talk about that really kind of goes hand in glove with our safer school strategy, it's really about how to address young people who are carrying firearms. In our state, it is unlawful for juveniles to carry firearms, whether it's at school or on the street or in a car or at home, because it's unlawful. In our state right now, it takes presently 5 convictions of a juvenile before that juvenile is eligible for interventions at our state facility. In January of this year, I worked with David Hackney, representative in Olympia, to see if we could change juvenile sentencing laws so that a juvenile might be eligible for services after the 3rd conviction. And that's not because I'm trying to send more kids to JRs, what we call juvenile rehabilitation, or get kids more system involved. But what I'm really trying to do is do the important intervention that is necessary to keep young people from carrying a gun than using the gun, because that is just a simple impulse in many cases. And at the time I was working on that legislation, I had at the time 7 young people who were charged as adults for either homicide or very serious assault with a firearm that had previous unlawful possession of firearm convictions. And if we could have intervened sooner, would we have saved those individuals from engaging in more risky, dangerous, and serious behavior? That that bill did not get a hearing, and we will be taking it up again in the 2026 legislative session. But in the off session, I really had to think hard and creatively about, are there other options that we can do, or things that we can, actions that we can take to get juveniles away from firearms. In Washington state, we have extreme risk protection order laws, sometimes called red flag laws, and it allows law enforcement or concerned family members to apply for an extreme risk protection order from the court when they believe someone has access to firearms and is a harm to self or others. In the case of juvenile extreme risk protection orders, those extreme risk protection orders are served on the family. The juvenile is not charged. It's a civil action. The records are sealed, and there's no criminal history or stigma attached to the youth. We launched that as a pilot project in July. It took some time to get law enforcement informed of our new practice. In August, we had 3 referrals from law enforcement, and by September, that had grown to 15. We have some recent examples of young people who came to the attention, in one case, of a school resource officer, in another case to the attention of law enforcement. There was a young person who acquired a firearm from another state, and he came to the attention of law enforcement. They sought a juvenile ERPO. It was served on the father, who acknowledged he had other firearms in the home. All firearms were removed and safely secured. And it was an important turning point for that family, because they had no idea that their young person had access to a firearm, that he had acquired a firearm from out of state. And so when I think about how we make our schools safe, these two pilot projects and actions go together. That is something that I've sought funding for as part of our 26-27 budget submittal and process. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I just want to make sure that I stop and give each of you an opportunity to ask questions. I read, I see, I do, I talk about this stuff all the time, but I also know that I can get into the weeds where I can use acronyms that may not be familiar. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions for Leesa? Well, I can kick off a question. So Leesa,
Okay.
is in terms of are these 2 projects, are there other pilots out there in Washington state or in other states, or are these truly sort of unique? I think it's always just interesting to have some comparative analysis, and also helps get the traction a little more sometimes.
Sure. I think as it relates to the safer schools strategy, I'm in touch with lots of prosecutors from around the country. I talk to lots of prosecutors from lots of jurisdictions. And I think that a lot of jurisdictions have some version of truancy dropout prevention, school engagement, creating linkages between courts and law enforcement and other important folks in that kind of network or safety net for young people. What is new about King County is that we just didn't have that in the same kind of formal way. And I am really, really proud of our senior deputy prosecutor who took this on as a passion project and did the hard work of getting juvenile probation and schools engaged and on board, and really volunteered herself to be the point of contact and to do the heavy lift of getting the word out, but also getting people to collaborate and to be more consistent in their approach and in their communications. So that is something that I think there are some other versions in other jurisdictions but it's new to us. As it relates to extreme risk protection orders, not every state has ERPO laws. Maine just voted theirs into law last night. But I am not aware of any other office that is really focusing on juvenile ERPOs. We in King County, through our Regional Domestic Violence Firearm Enforcement Unit, we were the first prosecutor's office in the country to have an enforcement arm for ERPOs. We led the nation, and there are many jurisdictions that are now kind of adopting our model. Spokane is a jurisdiction in our state that just came on board recently. So that work is truly innovative and new.
Okay, that's great. And Lori, did you have a question?
Yeah, Leesa, just a quick question on, I think it was the legislation you mentioned that you introduced that did not successfully pass this last time. Was it close? And do you have hope for the next time you introduce it? What's your feeling there?
Well, we didn't even get a hearing, so it didn't even come up for vote. I will work with representatives to reintroduce that bill because we're in a short session, and because the bill was introduced last year. It kind of picks up where it left off, which isn't very far in the process, but at least we're not at the stage where we're working to find sponsors or working to decide and determine which committee that it goes to. I have to be really candid. I think that part of the concern in, increasing the number of young people who are sent to JR is a concern over the impacts of what happens to young people who are caught in systems. And I understand that. And I also think that that juvenile rehabilitation is in a place where it is kind of being reinvented and improved in some really important ways. There were some challenges because of funding, because of staffing, where I think they lost trust in certain parts of our community. And so as they start to do the important work of becoming more responsive, more accountable, better funded, I think that our efforts to change the law or to get the young people the help they need will be more successful.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Leesa? I know she has more to say, so.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have to ask questions just about Safer Schools or ERPO. You may have other questions, and I'm always happy to answer those too. I will talk just a little bit about the budget request. So in King County, all criminal justice agencies, including the prosecuting attorney's office, is funded out of the county's general fund. The King County General Fund is fed by property tax, which is capped at 1%, sales tax, and new construction. So, gosh, almost my entire 30-year career in the prosecuting attorney's office, the general fund has been underwater. So since about 2008, there's always been a delta where the cost of living, the cost of just maintaining current services increases at a certain rate, and the revenue is more flat. So there's always a delta. So my 16-page budget request is really the accumulation of almost 2 decades of underfunding of important needs in the prosecuting attorney's office. So the thing that made this year different is we started the 26-27 budget process with a proposed cut to the prosecuting attorney's office of $15.5 million. Now that's a huge number, and it is the equivalent of the salary and benefit costs of 90 deputy prosecuting attorneys. I have 144 criminal practice prosecuting attorneys. My civil division prosecuting attorneys are revenue funded from other sources, and my family support deputy prosecutors, and I only have 7 of them, are funded by state and some federal dollars. So when I look at the challenge of potentially cutting 90 deputy prosecuting attorneys, the bulk of those cuts are going to be in my criminal practice divisions. So there was a lot of work within King County and other parts of our state where the lawmakers adopted a bill called House Bill 2015, and it allowed local legislative bodies the ability to enact a criminal justice sales tax, which would be 1/10 of 1%. So our King County Council, after that legislation passed, enacted this tax. And it is anticipated that it will generate about $104 million a year in brand new revenue. Now, the ordinance and the bill that allows the council to do this is drafted broadly. It's called a criminal justice sales tax, but allows the council to also direct this funds to address root causes, to address some social service needs, to support diversion. For me, I saw it as an opportunity to acquire resources for some of the important areas that have been neglected for 2 decades. The current state of things in King County, I look to the public defender's office because we see them in court all the time. And our public defenders have, let's see, they have 50 more general fund funded attorneys than I have criminal practice attorneys. So they have 194 and I have 144, all funded out of the general fund. And in the executive's proposed budget that was submitted to council in September, they are slotted to receive 17 more deputy prosecuting attorneys. And those are attorney positions. They don't include the legal service professionals, the paralegals, the investigators that support the public defenders. And our public defenders handle about 85% of the cases that we file because there's private defense counsel. And I say this not because I'm trying to take resources away from the public defenders. They're an important part of our criminal justice system. They are an important part of our very democracy and the very fabric of our belief in what is fair in a justice system. But I do want parity. I do want the same resources that the public defenders have because there are important public safety needs in our community that we cannot address unless we have resources. I'm going to stop for a second because Sharon, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Well, about two different topics.
Oh, okay.
Totally. I just took a safety class, and it was led by two members of the police department. I asked about the prostitution issue
Oh,
along Aurora.
yes.
I was surprised to hear their statement. They said that I asked why they're not doing anything about it. And they said they're going after the clients, the Johns.
Yep, they are.
But I want to know more about the policy and why this persists, if you could. Then my other issue is because I'm frequently in the international district passing 12th and Jackson. I'd like you to address that because it doesn't
Sure.
seem that it's improved at all. It's
Yeah.
horrific. It's out in the open. I know when I go to New York, there are beat cops on every corner.
Right.
I can go days and not see a
Right.
Seattle police officer. So maybe you could talk about both of those issues.
Sure, I will. And some of that folds into the conversation regarding our budget. So human trafficking is an area, it's one of my priority areas. It's an area where I sought resources as part of our 26-27 budget process in King County. So in order to end human trafficking, and that is the sale of human beings for sexual purposes, commercial sexual purposes, it's very resource intensive. I sought 2 case development specialists who would work alongside of police to get the warrants necessary, to capture the security footage from nearby stores, to be able to read the license plates, to do the geofencing to prove that this car that was seen with this victim was also on another street corner with another victim or the same victim. It's all very resource intensive. Those requests were denied in the executive's proposed budget. You know, when it comes to Aurora and Pack Highway, I feel like there's so much human suffering that we should all be concerned and embarrassed by what we see, because I know collectively in King County and City of Seattle and South County, we can and we must do better. You know, when there are traffickers who brag online that Seattle is a great place to engage in this harmful behavior because there's no accountability, I think we have to take notice of that. Now, I don't get to assign resources to the Seattle Police Department, but I know that they are finally getting to a place where they're getting more level in their staffing. They actually have an increase in officers for the first time in about 3 years. They have been kind of flat. So we need police in that area, but we also need prosecutors to work alongside of police, because police on their own cannot get the important warrants that they need from judges in order to do the investigative work that they have to do. Now, the reason that we go after the people who are selling, primarily young women, sometimes children, is because that's how we address the root cause. The women who are often forced into trafficking against their will or manipulated into trafficking, we treat those young women and those individuals as victims and survivors, and we connect them with services. We do not prosecute them. We do not connect them to the criminal justice system in that way. The police department is doing some innovative work with the skinny resources that they have to really focus on buyers. They do have police officers that are doing a emphasis, I don't want to say patrol, but what they are doing is capturing license plates when they see actual live exchanges or what they believe to be a live exchange. And they're sending letters to the address that is on the department that is associated with that car in the Department of Licensing. And it's a way to tackle the behavior with the skinny resources that they have. It's innovative. I think it will have some impact for sure, but we just have a lot of work that we can do in this area, but we need resources to do it. As it relates to 12th and Jackson, my daughter used to go to school at Summit Sierra, which is right there near 12th and Jackson. It's like 9th and Jackson. And I have to say that's a really problematic area. It has been problematic since the pandemic, and I'm sure before. It is an area where there is an open drug market, and you know, possession and public use are misdemeanor crimes, and in our under our state laws, it's the city attorney that handles those misdemeanors. What we have been doing as felony prosecutors and in the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is we focus on the drug dealers, because drug dealing is a crime. It's a felony crime. We work closely with law enforcement, and every week we are seizing huge amounts of fentanyl, guns, and cash that are coming to us from outside of the state, that are coming to us from South America. And we used to publicize that work more often, but it happens so frequently that we don't always get the same type of photos from law enforcement, just because it has become a bit of an everyday occurrence. Now, that said, there are still folks who are on the streets and they are suffering. And that's why I'm so grateful that we have programs like LEAD. Another effort that I'm leading, because, and this really gets to kind of the suffering that we're seeing on the streets, I'm leading a statewide listening tour around our involuntary treatment at court laws. Those laws in 7105 of the RCWs haven't really been amended in kind of a holistic way in more than 30 years. There have been updates here or there, but there hasn't been a complete and total reimagining of what this system would look like. So back in 2022, I had this notion of what would it look like if we were to reimagine our Involuntary Treatment Court Act laws, so that instead of having an adversarial system where I have prosecutors trying to get someone the help that they need against their will, and I take that very seriously, and instead of having public defenders fighting for that person's release to the streets and to nothing, what if we had a collaborative system and a collaborative approach where we had prosecutors, judges, crisis responders, law enforcement who aren't even part of our current scheme, working together to get people the help they need in the least restrictive means possible before they become victims or perpetrators of harm. Because our law is a state law, I built a multidisciplinary team from across the state, someone with lived experience, a public defender, someone from Disability Rights Washington and NAMI, my friend, the prosecutor in Whatcom County. And we are doing a listening tour. We are embarking on our 4th county, which is King County, and we're going to start that work later this month and carry on through to December and the early part of January. And we are working with a nonprofit based out of Whatcom called Chuckanut that's doing our research and our synthesizing our data so that it is sound and valid. And we'll be sharing that with lawmakers in hopes that we can make some changes so that some of the individuals that we're seeing on our streets that are in crisis because of behavioral health and mental health issues get help faster. So I kind of went off on a tangent away from budget. Are there any questions about any of that I shared? And then I can jump back to budget. I'm sorry I'm feeling so disoriented. I hope you guys are like following me and I'm not confusing anyone.
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Tyler, it's so good to see you.
Leesa,
Go ahead.
just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, it's not budget related, but you mentioned the
okay.
city attorney's office, which is top of mind after the elections results last night. So you'll have a new partner, it sounds like, there.
Yes.
But can you just give a quick overview for us of just how you collaborate and partner with the city attorney's office? I know just the basics. You do felonies,
Sure.
they do misdemeanors, but can you elaborate a little bit on that? I think that would be of interest.
Sure. You know, when I took office in 2023, I reached across the street and built a really strong relationship with Ann Davison, our city attorney. And the relationship between our 2 offices has never been stronger because we often see the same individual who are cycling in and out of our systems. And when we share information on who we see and what we're seeing and what services they have and haven't been offered, and also what behavior they are engaged in, we can do a number of things. One, if it's someone who is engaging in services, rather than starting the same service over and over and over again, when we trade notes, we can try different options. We can try different diversion programs. We can try different post-filing diversion programs. And that kind of coordination is helpful because it keeps us from starting at like step 1 each and every time. Sometimes there are folks who are doing really, awful harm in our community. And when we are sharing notes about the individuals who are committing, say, a number of smaller crimes that are misdemeanors, and I'm thinking about retail theft in particular, when we aggregate the value of loss, then we can file felony charges. And sometimes we are doing that because we're holding someone accountable in a way that is necessary. And sometimes we do that because I think about, for example, drug court. Drug court is a felony-based program. And here's a perfect example of how that works. Years ago, and I talk about this example simply because it's so clear-cut, but these types of examples happen all the time. There was a gentleman who was stealing alcohol from the downtown Target. Over the course of like 26 days, he had like 28 separate thefts of alcohol. Clearly, that person had a problem, substance use problem. But he also had the impact of scaring individuals that worked in the store, scaring individuals that shopped in the store. And so when that case was referred to us, and it was at the tail end of the pandemic, it took a while for it to be reviewed. Once it was reviewed, this person had finally connected with a lead case manager. I still authorize that we aggregate the value of those cases into felony charges, and we file directly into drug court. And the reason I did that is because that individual still had contact with their lead caseworker, but then they also had access to the structure and dedicated housing and dedicated case management of drug court. So while that person was on the upswing, we surrounded them with more resources. And then upon success, those charges are dismissed. So that would not have happened but for the sharing of information between our office and the city attorney's office. You know, we have a new city attorney that's going to be taking office in January. I do know Erica. I have talked to her a number of times. She is an experienced prosecutor. She cares deeply about public safety in our community. I think Erica is also going to be a very strong partner.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to budget a little bit. So the executive transmitted her proposed budget to council in September. That's kind of the normal course of things. And then the council has until Thanksgiving to adopt a balanced budget. One of the things that I've done under my administration is I have been sharing information out of the prosecuting attorney's office and sharing information about our work at a level that is really unprecedented in the history of the office. We have a shots fired report. I have a monthly report that goes out relating to charges involving firearms. We have changed how we share news with media so that it's more inclusive. We've done proactive lunch and learns about the important work of the office with media and with radio. And another way that I have shared information that is unprecedented, and it relates to budget. So under our former process or practice of the office, it's not rule, it's just it was the former practice under our former leaders. We would submit our budget request to the county executive at the end of June, first part of July, normal course. And then the executive would work on that budget for the entire summer and submit their proposed budget to council in September. And maybe in September, some of our council members would ask to see our original budget request, and sometimes not. And that's just how things were done within the prosecuting attorney's office for many years. But when I took office and when I worked on this budget, which is our first biennial budget process under my leadership, when I submitted my budget request to the executive, I also submitted it to each and every one of our King County Council members because I wanted them to know and I wanted to be open and transparent about what I was seeking. I also sent it to Sound Cities, which shared it with all of the mayors of our suburban Sound Cities and all of the council members. And I also shared it with our King County police chiefs and sheriff because I am the prosecuting attorney for all of King County. And I think it's important for people to know what my actions are and what I'm seeking. And I think that people rely on me to talk about important public safety issues that I'm seeing in our community. And that is why I did that. And I share that because sometimes when you engage in new behavior, it can be startling and there can be misunderstanding about the motives, or there can be confusion as to why all of a sudden the prosecutor's office is acting in a new way. So that's really my intention and my rationale behind that. So again, I'm not trying to take anything away from any other agency, you know, but I do feel like I have to be really honest about what I'm seeing in the prosecutor's office and the accumulation of need from being under-resourced for 20 years. And that's not because people are bad people. It's just because we've had a general fund that has been in trouble for nearly 2 decades. And we finally, for the first time in a long time, have a new source of revenue that can help criminal justice. If I want to end human trafficking and I need resources to do that, I cannot seek resources from the mental illness drug dependency tax. I cannot seek resources from the crisis care levy. I cannot seek resources from the Vets and Human Services levy because they're not allowed uses to fund prosecutors or case development specialists for that work. I'm not mad about that. I'm just being honest about that. But I can seek resources from the new criminal justice sales tax. So
Leesa,
happy to answer questions.
Yeah, so what has been, and we have the benefit of also Casey, who's on your staff, and also a Queen Anne Community member, we've had the benefit of him sharing a lot of your correspondences and your messaging, which has been a fantastic insight that we have never had before, really. So that's, I mean, we're lucky to have him, and as are you. What has been the response from your, kind of the council members in terms of hearing from you at this kind of maybe an earlier than usual stage? And have you felt like it's iterative as opposed to kind of getting up to that Thanksgiving deadline where
Right.
you might not know
Well,
what's
I
happening?
do feel like it's been iterative. I have been meeting, I've met with each of our council members one-on-one. I know that all of our council members have really tough decisions before them. I know that in King County writ large, there is more need than there are resources. I have been really candid with the council members about the reasons behind my ask. I've been really clear with council members that it's not my intention to take resources away from any other agency. It's not my intention to pick a fight with public defense or anyone. But again, that the request comes from a place of need where the prosecutor's office has been underfunded for 20 years because the general fund has been in trouble for more than 20 years. Um, I think that there is a lot of conversation and interest in the extreme risk protection order work, the safer schools work. I know that there are I've received questions about organized retail theft, which is another area where I sought resources. There has been some conversation and some interest around the vehicular assault and homicide cases and just the sheer number of cases that those prosecutors shoulder and carry. We do have in the executive's proposed budget funding for 8 new victim advocates. I asked for a total of 16. In our state, victims have constitutional and statutory rights, and we as a team in King County have not been honoring those in the way that we should. And again, I say that not with any kind of animosity or judgment. It's just what happens when you don't have enough resources. But under our state law, victims are supposed to receive resources in a manner that is commensurate with the individuals who are charged with crimes. And again, I value public defense. I'm not mad that they're well funded, but I know that we have to do more for victims. So the process is ongoing. Yeah.
Maybe you want to, I know Casey has shared with us, but, what is there, I mean, there's a public comment period, I've maybe you just want to share with us what the process is in
Sure.
case folks want to tune in and get involved.
Sure, there are budget finance committee hearing meetings. In fact, Tyler's husband is the vice chair of budget finance committee. I believe that the next hearing may be on the 12th. If you just do a quick Google search, King County budget, there is a link, and the link talks about the process, the timing. There's a link where you can leave comment or share a comment. And I believe at the hearing on the 12th, they are accepting public testimony. I do not know what time that hearing is. I may have known it at one time, but it's completely flown out of my head. So I do know that there have been individuals who have written to council in support of the prosecutor's office receiving more funding. And I have no doubt that it is the direct result of me sharing my budget request with a larger audience. These are folks who on their own, came to advocate for the prosecutor's office, not at my request, but because of the information that they received.
Okay. Well, we will continue to share out with our community. Again, Casey has been sharing a lot of your communications. Just we can share the public. I think I have those public comment period, those dates somewhere. I have them. Does anybody have any other questions for Leesa? I think we're sort of seeing how the sausage is made in a different way here. So thank you.
Sure. Tyler has a question.
Yeah, I just was wondering, Leesa, I think maybe just pulling up the lens again to kind of this moment of it's going to be a reset. whatever these upcoming elections land on and how they get certified. And I'm kind of curious about your kind of big picture view again around what the upcoming year looks like for you, and what you're hoping to see, as you know, we may or may not have a change in the mayor. We may or may, you know, we are not sure who will be our new King County executive. There's a lot of shifts across the region politically, and so oftentimes those changes create moments of rethink or reset. Or anyway, I'm just kind of curious about your big picture
Sure.
vision at the moment.
Sure. You know, my big picture vision, and this is just my approach both to the world and also to the work of the office, is I really like to identify common ground and grow from there. I think that we do good work when we work together. And, you know, I have to say both of our King County executive candidates are current clients of mine and will remain clients of mine, separate and apart from the results of the election. I have good relationships with both Councilmember Zahala and Councilmember Balducci. You know, I have worked with Mayor Harrell for a long time. You know, Katie Wilson is new to me, but I also know that when folks run for office, they usually do so because they care about our community. And while their priorities may be different, or maybe their focus is different, um, you know, I'm committed to working with all of our elected leaders, and all of our police chiefs and all of our communities, just because I think we have better results when that happens.
Great. Anybody, any more questions for Leesa? Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Leesa, do you have any closing comments for us? Otherwise,
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to me kind of drone on about the big and small parts of the work of the office. I hope you invite me back. I'm always happy to come back and answer questions. You have access to Casey. He's a really good resource. He's really good at sharing information out. He's one of my top leaders, and he always knows how to reach me. So anything that I can do to answer questions, make the work of the office less mysterious, I'm always happy to do that.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. All right, good night, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna record the rest of the meeting. I'm gonna stop that.